You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, everybody, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And so, once again, like we said, today was going to be another pre-record, but it's okay. It's a premiere. I'm not sure if either one of us are going to be in the chat or not this time, but I will say it was a great chat on Monday. I really like chatting with you guys. So, hey, even when these things are pre-recorded, doesn't mean we can't interact. So, feel free to chat away as we're talking. But before we get to this one, just wanted to do a quick update, actually, on our Monday show. So the day after, right, Tuesday,
right,
was when news broke that the Rey movie is actually going to start shooting on, like, April 4th.
Yeah.
Of this coming year.
Yeah, April 4th, 2024.
Yeah. Yeah, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, no way. I mean, we were just talking about it, you know, speculating, all that stuff, and then there you go. And they didn't actually say that. I mean, are they still sticking with the New Beginning title? I don't remember.
So far, I think that's just the working title, you know, that we know of. I'm sure as we get closer, we'll probably find out like the definite title, but so far, I think that's what they're going with.
And then, of course, you know, the other thing that we had talked about previous Friday, and even did it a little bit on Monday, is that when we were talking about the schedule and all that, and Andor Season 2, as we suspected, is being pushed back to 2025. So we're going to have to wait a little bit for that one, but at least we're going to get the Acolyte, and we're going to get Skeleton Crew. Hopefully that's good.
Bad Batch, I believe it.
Yeah. And, of course, the other thing that's been making the rounds in the news lately on a bunch of different fronts is what we're going to talk about tonight. And that is Mandalorian Season 4. Now, it's been confirmed that Pedro Pascal is not going to be able to get in the suit and do any acting for this, although it was revealed that he didn't actually do it last season either. He just simply provided the dialogue. He went in, recorded his lines, and it looks like that's going to carry over for this next season, where we're basically going to get him dubbing in his lines. It's going to be, you know, probably a stuntman or whatever that are just going to don the outfit the whole time. And unfortunately, he's got commitments with the second season of Last of Us and Gladiator 2, and you know, there's just all kinds of stuff. But what's interesting, though, is that there's also speculation that his character is going to start to take more of a back seat, and that another character is going to come up in his place. Now, of course, a couple of names have been thrown out there. Of course, Bo-Katan has been thrown out there. Maybe some other cameos where it's almost like it's just going to be a variety of people. But one of the other ones that, of course, keeps making its rounds is Boba Fett. That we might actually at least see him return in Season 4. And if not, definitely Season 5, or if they actually do another season. But I think that what's going to happen is he's at least going to be guest starring in Season 4. Well, what do you think are the chances of him actually being like the guy? Like he becomes the Mandalorian?
The chances, or do I want him to be?
Well, I mean, you know, it's a discussion show. Let's do both.
Let's do both.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
All right, you know, the chances of him becoming the Mandalorian.
Let's do an over-under. Like over-under. Well, we go over and under 50%.
I really don't think they're gonna make. I don't think they're gonna make him the Mandalorian. So I think I think if maybe there's a 30% chance that happens. I don't think so, because once again he kind of has his own series, Book Boba Fett, where he can, you know, I mean, I could see him popping up in it, sure, but actually being the star or the lead of it, Not so much, especially after the failure of Book of Boba Fett. Like, I don't think people would really would want to see that um
Yeah, but do you think the
right now.
failure though was due to the character or more the way that he was written? Because I think it was more the way that he was written.
True, the way that he was written, but that's the thing. It's like, well, in order to do that, you almost have to. I mean, unless you create a whole story arc that changes that,
Well, it's weird though
he's going to be
because
he's got to be played that way because you've already established him as this is who he is, and he's. I mean, you kind of set up the background in this whole journey of like, all right, this is the new Boba Fett essentially. So unless you create another circumstance that changes now what you've already established, I think that would be kind of. And I think if you do that, I think that would be more appropriate to be in his own series if you're going to do that.
well, here's the thing that I find kind of strange about the whole thing is the fact that in The Mandalorian, he's written basically the way that we had always thought he would be.
Right.
He didn't really wuss out until his own series.
Right.
Now, we could chalk that up to the fact that it's a circumstantial thing. Maybe he just, he's trying to be this criminal, you know, like, well, he's trying to walk the
Lord.
line, right? He's not actually trying to be a straight out criminal. He's trying to be more like uh, like a,
He's almost
uh,
trying to be like a magistrate, almost like how Grief Karga is,
well,
in
kind
a
of like,
way.
yeah, exactly. Almost like a benevolent dictator in a way, kind of like a benevolent crime lord. I guess that would be the best way to put that. And circumstances could maybe make him return to the way that he was because in The Mandalorian, he was established more the way that we thought. So he might have just been trying to, hey, look, I'm going to try to be the super cool guy in the circumstance. But then if you remember toward the end, when Din came in and started helping him and, the whole big finale and stuff, he was starting to be a little bit more him. But I know what you mean, though. I mean, on one hand, I think that he definitely would have the weight as far as no pun intended, because I know Tamira Morrison did get a little bit bigger, but
Hmm.
basically, Boba Fett has a marquee value in his name.
Hmm.
And the thing is, I would actually agree with you on the 30%, except I don't think there's going to be a second season of Book of Boba Fett.
For good reason, and that's the thing too, is because you know, and I think that when you're talking about Boba Fett, like of course, yes, the name carries weight, sure, but I think that once again, like a lot of things in Star Wars, unfortunately, has been sullied because of the Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett did not deliver to fans of Star Wars and Boba Fett primarily. That it really didn't deliver as far as what they expected from him. So, or from his character. So now you have a situation where, like, now you want to bring him back into the Mandalorian, which has been an established character. We've gotten 3 seasons. We've gotten familiar with this character. Everyone's fallen in love with Grogu, um, and that's another part of it too. It's like because with Din, it's like because you're still gonna have to explain, well, okay, what's up with Grogu then? Like where did he go? I mean, of course, 9 times out of 10, he's with Din. So I really don't think that Boba Fett would be the person to really take on the mantle of this particular series. I think I would lean more heavily towards Bo-Katan. That would make more sense because at least you have precedence now because um, Grogu's been with the Mandalorian, the new Mandalorian. I won't say collective, I guess,
Or
if you want to call them
tribe or
that, or
whatever, yeah.
tribal. Yeah, exactly. Because they had him trying to do all the little war stuff and
Yep.
the little drills in the sand. So at least he's used to being around them. So he might say like, hey, watch after him while I take care of this other business or something like that. But like I said, his character is still going to be around. Pedro is just not going to be there to play him, so he's just going to
Right.
dub the lines like we did last season. So
And that's
I
the
don't think
thing.
it's really going to be the case.
Well, and
Because
again,
that's
I mean,
that's what people are coming to see. They're coming to see Din. They like this version of a Mandalorian. So and his relationship with Grogu, because that's especially as that has grown, because now it's more like a father type son type thing, which is kind of cool, which we've never really seen too much before. We got a little bit of it with Boba and Jango in Attack of the Clones. You know, you kind of see that a little bit, but we never that
Vader
didn't
and
really
Luke.
last too long. Well, I mean, just from the Mandalorian standpoint.
Yeah, I know.
But so I think this is a cool, interesting twist. I don't want to say twist, but angle. I think that's a better word. Angle on the Mandalorians, because we've often kind of just seen them as these, you know, bounty hunters that's kind of cold and calculated, but like that's just their job, you know, and people a lot of times can't separate the two. You know, a lot of people think like, oh, because you are a bounty hunter, that you're this cold, ruthless killer almost. And it's like, well, only if I have to be, you know. But
Mhm.
really, you know, it's just an enforcement agent, you know, essentially like a police officer in some form. So I think this is a cool take when you actually see like, okay, now we're pulling back the layers of the Mandalorian race, the Mandalorian culture, and with Boba Fett just now getting back into that and kind of regaining his heritage, so to speak. I think I don't think this would be the show for that to happen, for him to do that. I think he need to explore that more in the Book of Boba Fett season 2, if there is to be one.
So I mean, but so that was a whole 30% chance that he was going to do it. But then the second part of that, unless you already answered that, is would you want it?
No,
Or
that's wrapped up in my answer. That was kind of combined it too.
I thought
But
that might be where you
yeah,
were going, but I wasn't,
yeah, yeah. No,
100%
I didn't.
sure.
I didn't make that clear. So yeah, no. To
It
your
could have been an
point.
analysis type of thing, Um,
No, but I don't think I wouldn't want to see Boba Fett. I mean, like I said, unless they once again just deliver a really good, compelling story. I mean, sure, then I'll of course become interested in it. But as it stands right now, no, I wouldn't want to see that. I want to see Din.
well, and it's a hard conversation anyway, because on one hand, yeah, we know that Din is going to still be the guy in season 4.
Hmm.
However, the idea is the appearances of Bo-Katan and possibly Boba Fett. It's more like, are they going to hand the mantle off? Because this is going to be the second time that Pedro can't really do it. Now, on one hand, you could say, well, hey, if if they're actually saving money because they don't have to pay Pedro to be on set all this time, right? It's like it's a lot cheaper
Hmm.
for them to just come in, dub his
Yeah.
lines, and then see you, And of course, he can, because the whole reason why he had to be in the armor was because a couple of times he would take his helmet off. But they had said
Hmm.
last season, and they stuck to it, where they were going to try to minimize that to where, okay, we basically had that happen. Now we're not going to do that anymore. So if they never have him take his helmet off, they really don't need Pedro there. Because even since
Right.
season 1, he wasn't exclusively in the costume. I mean, his stuntmen and all that, all they've done is they've just pretty much taken it over. So
Hmm.
really the conversation isn't so much even about season 4. It's really more about maybe the second half of season 4, but definitely going into a potential season 5. It's like, who is going to carry the show? Because they may decide, if Pedro keeps wanting to step back his involvement, well, then it might end up being somebody else. I mean, they might have to go, well, we don't want to put all of our eggs in that basket, so to speak. They might want to carry it on, or they might
Hmm.
want to divide it up, where the Mandalorian is sometimes Din, sometimes Boba Fett, sometimes Bo-Katan, sometimes the armor. I don't know, and it's
Well, that's kind of the weird thing, that's about this show. It's kind of cool because once again, this is the flagship show. This will launch Disney Plus, honestly. Like this is
Yeah.
why a lot of fans really got into Disney Plus was because of this show. Um, and then now you've had like, we kind of expected this whole Western gunslinger type thing, which we've gotten for the most part. And but in the process of that, we've also gotten, and we all thought that was going to be kind of away from the Force and the Jedi and all that stuff. Well, that all changed when you brought Grogu into the mix,
Mm-hmm.
and then now he's using the Force and doing stuff, and then that further complicates things when you bring Ahsoka and Luke now into it. You've brought two Jedi, knights slash masters into the series now. Now, bringing Bo-Katan into it. Okay, that's relevant. That makes sense. I mean, even Ahsoka and Luke being, I mean, it's relevant. Don't get me wrong,
Well, it's
but
relevant
I think
because of Grogu using. See, here's the problem, and this is what you're basically alluding to, and you and I have talked about this in our reviews of the series, actually, and that is that if you make Grogu a Force user and he starts to use the Force, sure, you can isolate that. Like if you want to keep it the lone gunslinger and he's sort of using the Force and maybe learning his way around it, kind of. You could
mhm.
do that. You could actually have that to where it's contained. But on the problem with it, and of course they saw the problems with it, which is why they did what they did, is that as soon as you bring in a Force user, well, now it doesn't make any sense that Luke, or at least Luke, wouldn't come back, right? Because, I mean, he's trying to rebuild the Jedi Order. He's certainly going to sense a Force user. So, yeah,
Well, not only that, but I mean, it just makes sense because Luke is around in this time period,
that's what I
and all this
mean.
stuff
Yeah.
going on. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like all this stuff going around. Even if Grogu wasn't, let's just say even if Grogu wasn't in the picture. I mean, you still can ask the question, well, where the heck is Luke? Because we asked the same question like in the original trilogy. Like, okay, well, you got all this stuff with this Galactic Empire stuff going on. Like, where the heck was Ahsoka? Because we know that she survived. Well, once you know that she survived, that begs the question: well, where the heck was she during this whole period? Where, because like we always have said that Luke could have been like, man, where the heck were you? I could have definitely used your used your help, especially after
Well,
Obi-Wan died.
yeah, I mean, because you could go one of two ways with that. Because this is where I think a lot of the um, more ancillary material, definitely all the peripheral stuff, like the books and all that. I thought they really did a great job. Particularly New Dawn was a good example. There's a couple other ones where they really put you in what's happening and how the Jedi just feel so detached and powerless from one another. I mean, you could even get that sense in Obi-Wan, honestly, where you would think that, okay, there's a bunch of these Jedi, why didn't they just, find each other and then try on another thing? But, they were on the run, they were on the hunt, they were isolated. Some of them somewhat atrophied with the Force, others didn't. I mean, it's that hopelessness of what am I going to do against all these other guys? And then, of course, you have to look at it, too, from the standpoint that Yoda went up against him and lost and went into exile. So, it's like if they knew where Yoda was, maybe they could do it. But, and Ahsoka actually left the Jedi Order anyway. I mean, as far as she was concerned, it was probably like, look, okay, these guys won. She definitely was trying to fight injustices in her local areas,
Yeah, yeah,
but I mean,
yeah.
as far as mounting an entire offensive against the Empire, I mean, you're right. The other part of that, though, is she was in Rebels, and she was part of the rebellion. So,
hmm
see, if they had just
Especially,
stuck to the whole, thing where, hey, I'm, peace out, see you guys later, and then we never heard from her. As soon as they brought her back into Rebels, man, that's when all bets were off.
yeah, especially then of course oh, who blew up the Death Star? Luke Skywalker.
Well, then there's that, right? Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. So now you know what I mean. But I
Unless it's
know
a
it's kind
common
of a
name, you
deviation.
know? Well, I mean, it
Yeah,
is
it's
and
just
it
a common.
isn't, though, because The Mandalorian takes place firmly in this time period. You're bringing in all these characters. Like you said, it is the flagship, so it very much is relevant.
Well, no, I mean in the sense of like bringing, because I know the topic is Boba Fett, or who's going to take over the Mandalorian, and I
Stay on
think
topic.
it's right.
Just a few
So
more
I
points.
so I think it's kind of see, and the thing is, we also know that they're mounting this whole Mandoverse collaboration movie too. That's to come as well.
Well, that's why I
So,
say that there's a good chance for Boba Fett.
well, like I said, I believe he's a part of that.
He
Sure, I
is
think
big
he's going
part.
to be. Yeah, I think he's going to be a part of it. But as far as now, to me, what I could see is after that film, depending what happens in that film, who dies, who survives, you know, then you can start to say like, okay, well, let's say Din dies or whatnot, and Grogu kind of just is despondent, so he goes off for a while or whatever. Then maybe you can say, all right, it's Boba's turn to kind of pick up the mantle and kind of do his thing or whatever. You could make it that way, but like I said, at this juncture though, I wouldn't say that he would be the front runner. I think it's more Bo-Katan, especially after how we left season 3. If you recall, like season 3 left us with a possible, um, dead Moff Gideon,
Mm-hmm.
and then you also have uh wasn't Din captured, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, and because he went back to kind of to save everybody. So, and I know Bo Katan, she felt the way because a lot of her people died in that battle. So she was feeling a lot of guilt and whatnot. And he went back to kind of give them a fighting chance in a sense. So now she's got to try to bring him. So I think that's going to be, quite frankly, like the big focal point of season 4
Well, the whole
is
Mandalorian, yeah, like the retaking of it and, rebuilding and all that stuff. I mean, it's been really,
mhm.
we've been building up to that since season 2.
Yeah,
But Boba Fett was a
yeah.
big part of that too, though. And then there was tension between Bo-Katan and Boba Fett, and okay, the Fetts were like these pretenders, and then he proves he's an actual Mandalorian, which is huge.
Yeah, but then I think, but because once Boba Fett decided to go to Tatooine and kind of do his own thing, I mean, it doesn't rule him out because, of course, but he's trying to build up his whole regime with Fennec Shan and, you know, in that in on Tatooine. So I don't know if he has, and quite frankly, he doesn't have the resources, obviously, because you saw what he
It's
was
like
like in
3
season
guys.
1. Yeah, and a Rancor that he's a pet that he's riding around,
Well, that's
you
not
know, and
insignificant, though. But I mean,
no,
but
but
then again, Boba
but then,
Fett's always
and
been a
then had
loner, though.
yeah, but then Den had to come help him, so it was like,
Mm.
okay, not saying that Boba Fett couldn't be of any, but it's just going to be Boba Fett. It's not like he's bringing some army with him like Bo-Katan is.
No, I mean, and again, I think,
Bo-Katan hasn't much of an army now anyway,
well,
though.
so what you would have to do, what you would have to do if you're one of the writers of this thing, and let's just say you want to include Boba Fett in this, it is true. You would have to say, okay, what do you use? What story device do you use to bring Boba Fett out of his whole Tatooine situation and even getting into the fray of this battle? Right? Because it's like a retaking Mandalore kind of thing, but
He does owe Den a favor, though, so that could be the thing.
well, that's
If
true.
Bo-Katan, if Bo-Katan comes to Boba Fett, it's like, hey, he saved your life. You might want to repay him back for that. Then you could kind of like, okay, I could see Boba Fett going like, well, you got a point. All right. fine. I'll go do what I got to do to help him out because, he did the same for me at one point. And I think if I recall correctly, Bo-Katan and Boba Fett, they kind of more or less mended their ways in the sense of like, okay, she kind of respects him now because he did prove that he's a Mandalorian and, he's, obviously he's a fierce warrior and he's doing his own thing. So I think that might be the angle that they use to bring him into it.
Yeah, and I mean, not only that, but I think they have to because, like you said, they got to set up this movie at some point, right? So I think a lot of it comes down to as far as because you're right, the movie is a big thing too, and you can't discount that. And you had to
Hmm.
figure out, well, where does this movie fit? It sounds like that maybe, you know, with the release schedule the way it is, okay, well, now we know since the Ray movie's shooting first, no pun
Hmm.
intended, uh, not Greedo, the Ray movie. Uh, basically, that could be that first movie that comes out in 26. Now, what the second movie might be, because remember, there's going to be 2 released that year,
That's going to be the James Mango movie.
is it? And so then
Yeah.
the
So
Mando
I
one
think
is after that then?
the third,
Like in
yeah,
20
because yeah,
whatever?
that's the last one. Yeah, I believe that's the last one because yeah, Ray was already scheduled to because that was the one that was furthest along. They just kind of got James Mangold's whole thing kind of up and running. So they're probably just writing the scripts and getting everything set. And of course, now after the strike and everything is over with, now they can really kind of start moving on that. Um, and then followed by um, Filoni doing the Mandoverse movie, which was always kind of I would well they never said which one was which, but it makes the most sense though because the Ray movie was closer to production, which we're seeing now. Now that we have an official, start time for for the film, then James Mangold, that was uh, it's going to be between him and Filoni, but I think Dawn of the Force or whatever it was called, Dawn of the Jedi.
I think
I
that's what it
think
was called.
um, that makes more sense to do as a second film, followed by like okay, like because now you're giving Filoni enough time because that's the biggest thing is like you got to give Filoni enough time to one end everything in this series that he has going on because he's got Ahsoka, he's got the Mandalorian, he's got if there is a book of Boba Fett, which I doubt, but if they do a season 2,
Well, that
you
was part of
have
what I was
that.
gonna say. I mean, are they gonna have time? I mean, if you think about it, even to do an Ahsoka season 2, I mean, the earliest that would come out would be like mid-25. So I guess maybe they could squeeze, but then they'd have to go turn around and do simultaneous production. So a lot of it is, well, when is this
Release it.
Mando thing gonna? Yeah. In other words, is season 4 of the Mandalorian gonna be what we get that leads to this big movie, or are they gonna try to squeeze in a Ahsoka season 2, or maybe even like a really short a la Obi-Wan, where it's like 6 episodes, like you said, another book of Boba Fett. Because what I was laughing
Yeah.
about was when you talked about the Dawn of the Jedi being the next movie after the Rey thing.
Yeah.
I was already hearing like the trailer, right? It's almost like, you see Rey rebuilt the Jedi Order, now see it how it all began or something. Like it would actually be kind of a cool little bookend in a way because you're seeing it,
Yeah.
in the future after the Skywalker saga. Now let's go back and see how all this started. Before
Yeah.
there was the Skywalkers, before there was Rey, there
Yeah.
was whoever.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could, yeah, and that definitely would make sense. Um, I just and yeah, you really just kind of, and that's what I'm saying. I think the James Mangold gives Filoni time, and then it also gives him time to really get his movie right, the directing, because we know he's not the strongest when it comes to live action. So he
No,
needs more. He needs more time to really
he needs more
get that together.
experience.
Yeah,
For
that's what I
that
mean. Like
reason,
more
for that
experience.
reason, what I would like to see, again, we don't really know, like, well, what's going to be out for this movie to come out? Are we going to get another Ahsoka? If we get another Ahsoka, okay, cool. But even if we get another Mandalorian, which we're probably going to get Mandalorian season 4 before we get this movie. So it's like, dude, direct like half of the series.
Mhm.
You know, let all your, your Bryce Dallas Howards and, maybe no, what's that? Rick?
Deborah Chow.
Yeah, Deborah Chow and
Rick
Fukuyama or
Fumaya,
whatever. I can never remember that dude's name,
yeah,
but maybe get
yeah,
those guys to do like one each or something. But yeah, because a bunch of time isn't going to do Filoni any good. He needs experience. He needs to do it,
yeah,
and I would much rather him cut his teeth on these shows rather than prematurely direct a film and then have that. Because again, that's going to have the bigger ramifications. If they have
yeah.
another catastrophic failure in the films, it's going to be really hard for Star Wars to recover from that.
Especially if this Ray movie is actually good,
Well,
and
yeah.
then followed by James Mangold being great.
Well, then it could actually
Like,
weather the storm. I mean, I didn't really
well,
think about that, but you're
could.
right. Those would come out first.
Yeah, and it could, but then it also is like it also just takes like it also will take the wind out of the sails of the fan base too, because it's
Well,
like
yeah.
once again, it's like ooh, like you know, what I mean, it's just so
It's like, here we go. It's Ryan
yeah, like this.
Johnson all over again, right? Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
knew it. I
Yeah, I
knew it.
knew it.
I
I
should
knew it
have.
was too good to
Yep,
be true. It's kind of
yep,
like the
and
Lions.
yeah,
It's very much like the
right.
Lions. Lions could win like 5 games in a row, then they lose a game, and it's like, up, same old Lions. See, I told you.
Yep,
You know.
yep. Yeah, exactly. So it's just one of those things, where and the Mandalorian has, and even like I said, even in that, no pun intended, but that's had some chinks in the armor as of season 3. You know, so it's kind of like
I
we
know.
really have to make sure that these things are just buttoned up properly, and we're just pushing out the best product. It's like you want the pure. It's almost like selling drugs or whatever. You want the purest cocaine. You don't want a whole bunch of stuff that's stepped on. And it's like, oh yeah, but it's we're able to push it out in volume and numbers. And it's just like, yeah, but people are like dying in the streets from it because it's not. You got so much additives and crap added to it that it's not.
Exactly.
If
It's
you're
like
gonna
we're just
do
gonna
it,
take a
do it
little bit
right.
of pure George Lucas vision and cut in a little Panderverse and
Yep, and
I mean, but
add a crap load of Kathleen Kennedy
crap
wokeness
load of
and
Kathleen Kennedy, exactly. Well, but see, the thing
that's the
is,
baking soda.
yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. Looks like Lucas, but not really. But the thing about it that I find it interesting is when you go back and you watch season 3. And again, I haven't done this in a little bit. I really need to. What I want to do is actually go back and start from season 1 and binge 1 through 3 again. I think that would be an
Mm.
interesting experience now. But what I'm thinking is a lot of the missteps in season 3, because there were some cool elements to it. Like what was it was probably the Lizzo Jack Black Christopher
Episode.
Lloyd episode, which,
Yeah.
was just like, but again, the
Story was
idea,
good.
the story was great. And that's the thing, is that I sometimes wonder if some of these awkward cameos and some of this other stuff wasn't Kathleen Kennedy pushing her vision on Filoni and Favreau, and that was sort of like a compromise.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know. A lot of time, I don't know where the breakdown comes in. Because a lot of times you'll have Um, Great story, great writing. I mean, in the sense of the story is concerned, and then you'll have either like the acting is very wooden or over the top, or just something's off with it, and then or the pacing of certain things are just not where what it should be, and you just often, especially when it's, and I have to really, you know what, I really need to figure out like, okay, out of the episodes that we see, which ones are like that, like directed by whom?
Yeah,
Because my
right.
thing is just like, no, because like you think about like, okay, so when Bryce Dallas Howard, directs the
I
episode,
was just thinking that too.
it's good.
All the time.
When yeah, all the time. It's like consistency. It's like, okay, when Rick does one, it's consistently good for the most part. Um, Deborah Chow. I think for the most part, most of her stuff has been maybe one or two might have been off, but if I'm not mistaken. So I'm trying to figure out like, all right, so it you almost like, is it the directors or is it the writing really? But then, like I said, the story is good. So sometimes you have to kind of figure out like where the breakdown is,
Well, that's
and
why
I
I'm
think
wondering. I
that's
mean, I wonder sometimes if there's interference, from above. We all know who that is.
yeah, of
But
course.
and you're right. I mean, it could be could be a direction thing. Um Sometimes it could be a budget thing too. Like
It
they'll
could be a
actually
budget, yeah,
shoot, they'll want to shoot something and they'll be like, I can't do it the way we really envisioned. And then they start to cut corners and then, we get the episode.
or or you kind of wonder like, okay, is it the availability of certain people so they can't really devote as much time to the, so like for example, and I'll just, Lizzo, okay, she's touring a lot. So okay, she's doing this one little episode, but let's say she didn't have a whole lot of time to really do her thing, to like really get into the character and really prepare. So is that part of the problem?
Right, that classic,
Or
okay,
is it,
you've got me for like one day or something. Or
yeah,
sometimes you get a situation too where they have enough time, but then when they need to go and do reshoots or whatever, it's like, I'm not available, so now we got to figure something out.
yeah, or let's just say that she just didn't have time to really, oh, we got backed up on tour. Sorry, I'm late. Okay, but I'm here. Let's do this. And she shows up not prepared because she's not an actress. That's
Right.
not her thing. So, and that's another thing. Like, okay, you got somebody like Christopher Lloyd who's been acting, for as long as we can remember. It's like, okay, he's going to be spot on, and his character was
Yep.
Jack Black. Once again, been acting for years. Okay, Lizzo is the only one who's not an actor. So you're gonna have to. It may be harder to get certain things out of her because she just doesn't know how. So it's, could that be? And that goes back to what your point was in a moment ago, Eric, where it's like, oh well, Kathleen wants Lizzo in here because this speaks to her agenda, purpose, or whatever. Well, I want Lizzo in here. I think she'll be perfect. Put her in there. She'll be fine. And she's not fine. Oh no, no, yeah, it's good. And then now we get, it's like, okay, well, this is kind of crappy, and it's like, what the heck is this? So I don't know. It's just,
Well, and the other thing too, I mean, even when awkward cameos aside, you also have situations like season 3 was just so uneven. And sometimes it's even a departure. Like that felt like a combination of a Star Trek show versus, or like combined with like Law and Order. It was,
mhm.
I mean, I thought the Law and Order aspects were actually kind of cool, but it was like, okay, you've got this really cool story. Like when you look at season 3 versus season 1, it's like a different show.
Yeah, definitely.
See, and it doesn't matter because, like, okay, when they stuck Bill Burr in there as Miggs
Hmm.
Mayfield, he's actually had acting experience and he's really good.
Hmm.
And that ended up being an inspired choice. But
Yeah.
it's like, okay, they didn't sacrifice the tone of the show for his character.
Hmm.
In fact, it enhanced it because his first appearance was when they were doing that almost like heist type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like an Italian Job, Ocean's 11 style episode. And it was
Yeah.
very much a part of the main storyline. The problem with season 3 is not only was it uneven, not only did you have all these weird, awkward cameos and just weird character stuff, but the other problem was you basically just had like a just these really huge
It's
how do I
like
want to put this?
sweeping themes.
Well, it's kind
Almost
of like
sweeping.
you're vastly veering off of the storyline. It's
Well,
like you're
yeah.
going in these other it's like directionless. You're going in all these directions. And I mean, they would be fine if it was more episodic, but the fact
Yeah.
that that's not the type of show that The Mandalorian is, it felt kind of awkward to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then you have like to that point, you have a lot of episodes that within themselves just didn't land, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
when you couple that with you don't have a direction, yeah, it starts to derail the entire um engine, if you will. So yeah, I think and I think it's part of the problem too, because we want Star Wars to push the limits and push, beyond what we've. And I know that's what fans are asking for, but at the same time, it's kind of like it has to be very calculated, though. And by pushing, we don't necessarily mean it has to be. I think that might be the part too. It's like, so let's just say you know me, my my athletic analogies, right? You have a kid, who wants to be a starter on the team. And it's like, okay, he's training and he's been, progressing. And it's like, okay, well, you got to push yourself. Well, pushing yourself doesn't always mean huge leaps. Sometimes it's just an incremental thing that
Hmm.
you're just doing. Like success is like a bunch of little things done correctly that leads to greatness. And it's like if you start doing things like that, where you start tweaking little things or adding nuances to like, oh, that was really good. I like that angle. And that's all you really needed. You don't need to make the whole episode like that. You just may need to make one turning point that was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. All right, you did your job. You did it. You don't have to, and I think you made a reference to this where you're like you're trying to make a viral video instead of just making a good video go viral. And it's like everybody's trying to make the Academy Award winning film, or everybody's trying to make that Grammy Award winning album. It's like, no, just make a good song. Like just make that
Hmm.
one turning point in the episode or in the film where it's like, or in the, where people can see it like, ooh, wow, that was good. Man, I can't wait to see and now you kind of add of I wonder what they're gonna do next. And it's just little micro things like that. But I think what Lucasfilm right now is trying to do, they're trying to make these huge, like uh Steph Curry shots from half court. And it's just like you don't need to do that. Just make an impressive, 2-pointer. Just make a
Hmm.
solid shot where it's just like, man, that turned the game right there just because you moved the ball around and you got it in the basket in the right amount of time and you're killing the clock from the other team. That's progressive because now you're putting yourself in a good position versus trying to make a half court shot that will look pretty, but you may make it, you may not. It's a huge risk. And I think that's what we're seeing from Star Wars right now. It's just that they're taking these huge risks um, that could make Star Wars, go up, or it can completely obliterate it. And I think they just need to stick with the safer, calculated shots where you pushing it incrementally.
Well, you could do that. I mean, that's probably what they should do as a general rule. But my thing is like, look, My big problem isn't even so much sometimes that they try to do these wild, variations or something. My problem is when they do it when they do it not by project but by episode. That's where it gets
Hmm.
bad. It's like, look, if you want to create a show that maybe pushes some boundaries or something as far as what people think Star Wars is or something, like if they wanted to say, okay, we're going to make like a Star Wars genre film. We bring this up all the time. That's technically pushing it beyond. But
Hmm.
you don't have a show like The Mandalorian and then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, well for this episode, we're going to make it a romantic comedy." That's what I'm talking about and that's what they did with
Yeah,
season
yeah.
3. Is that
Oh, yeah.
once you establish the tone and the parameters of a project, stay within that. And this is where your
Hmm.
point comes in that if you want to do stuff that's a little outside, maybe just put like little nuggets in there, or, you know, just kind
Hmm.
of sprinkle all the stuff in there rather than try to make these like crazy left field things where the whole show becomes uneven. It's kind of like, well, if you want to make a show like don't put that kind of an episode in the middle of this show that's completely something else. Base another show off of that kind of thing.
Well, that's why we just talked about Andor. One of the things we loved about Andor was that
Hmm.
we've often seen the love interest, of course, on the hero side of things, but when you start adding, Deidre and Cyril, you kind of playing with that whole little love interest thing. See, that was pushing because we've never seen that in Star Wars
Right,
before.
right.
And that was cool. But it wasn't too over the top. It wasn't like, they just wake up in the morning and they're in bed to go, "Good morning, honey." It wasn't like, some sitcom. It was more like I'm trying not to show my cards here, but for whatever reason, I'm kind of into this person, but I don't know why. But like it kind of creates a different type of tension,
Dude.
which was which was brilliant. And I was just like, you know what?
Ugh.
I love that, and because I want to, it made me want to see more of their interaction with each other, just because it was so different. It was so awkward in a way, but I really got into it, and I think see moments like that, but it fit right within Andor's scope, though.
That's the thing. It
Just
fits within the tone of that show.
yeah,
That's the difference. Is that whole little
hmm
sub storyline fits within the tone of the show, but I was just thinking when you said, we just see a scene where they wake up in bed together. 9 times out of 10 if we saw that he'd be eating cereal.
All
Or it'd
right,
be
good
like a
morning,
scene
honey.
where, she's like almost like a breakfast in bed and it's his cereal.
Yep.
I mean, but yeah, that's basically the issue is that on one hand, with Andor, you have a situation where it fits. It's within the tone of the show, it's within that parameters. They're not going outside. It fits nicely in with the rest of the plot of the show. Whereas some of
Mhm.
the things in season 3 of The Mandalorian clearly were just, you're kind of like, well, what? I don't even understand the context of this now. And then they're trying to shoehorn this stuff in there, like at the end of that Lizzo Jack Black episode, where it's like, okay, now the two Mandalorian camps are gonna face each other and all this, and okay, I'll give up the dark saber, whatever. I mean, it was like, whoa, where did all that come from? It was
Mhm.
just completely all over the place, even though the idea behind, hey, we created these droids to help us and now they basically enslaved us. That's awesome. I want to see that entire series. I'm like, that is actually the premise of an entire series in Star Wars that could be very compelling.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think season 4 has to put things right, or put things back on track.
Yeah, more like
I
season
think
1
that's
and 2.
yeah. I think we need
Yep.
to kind of get back to that to that vein, and I think with Bo-Katan. I think her story is more so compelling because okay, now she has the dark saber. Now she's leading her people. We're seeing her struggles, of course, trying to lead and wanting to be a leader, of course. And then now we have Din, who's been captured. So, and then you have Grogu, who's still with Bo-Katan, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm recalling correctly. I think she's still
Hmm.
because he was never captured with Din. So, so yeah, I think that's really going to impact season 4, and then I think after that, we really have to see where that lands us because then, like you said, that could be the setup and the premise for this whole Mandoverse film, or because now we still have to contend with Ahsoka and what happened at the end of that series with Thrawn too. So it's interesting, but I don't think I think Boba Fett will be featured in it definitely because I think he's going to be needed, but um, especially when it comes to like maybe rescuing Din, you know, but especially because he kind of has Imperial experience too, because he's was constantly working with the Empire on different stuff, so he kind of and Gideon is basically an Imperial officer. So he kind of gets kind of how they operate and how they move. So that I could see that being the angle that they use, but I don't think he's going to be um, the lead, if you will, for the Mandalorian.
Well, and it depends on how you look at things. Because, like, now going to my answer, I would say 60%. It's almost the
Really?
opposite. Yeah. Because
Okay.
for all the reasons you just said. Because don't forget, it's not replacing Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan's place in the Mandalorian seasons, I think, is going to be intact, no matter who's there. The
Hmm.
idea is who's really replacing Din as the Mandalorian proper, I guess.
Hmm.
And Boba Fett is the perfect guy to slot into that role because if you think about it, Din is really taking more and more of a supportive role. In fact, one of the complaints that we had when we were reviewing the season, even to a degree,
Yeah.
well, it was really more on the Book of Boba Fett side, but then even in Mandalorian season 3, if you notice in season 3, we were featuring Din less and less. It was starting to become more of an ensemble cast, which is fine, but it really wasn't what the series was supposed to be. It wasn't what we were sold. We were
Yeah.
sold that lone gunslinger that's going to go from town to town, clean up stuff, kind of like a kung fu kind of thing with
Hmm.
David Carradine, or something like that, or even like Red Dead Revolver, the game, or, stuff like
Yep.
that. Just kind of like, we're following his story as he goes from town to town, planet to planet, meets people along the way. That's why it was such a perfect flagship show because you can introduce people that you can later spin off into their own shows. So you can use The
Yep.
Mandalorian to seed out new shows.
Yeah. It's a hub.
Or
If I'm.
sure, or you could even do something like they could cross over, right? Like he goes to, I don't know, Coruscant or something, or maybe Corellia. And then maybe you get the whole like remember how there was supposed to be the Solo 2? You could
Hmm.
actually start some of that by the Mandalorian meets up with them, helps them on a little adventure. Okay, now that establishes them within the Disney Plus universe, and now they could be seeded off into their own show because essentially you're using the Mandalorian to, well, you're using specific episodes to become pilots. That's kind of how Ahsoka was.
Hmm.
Mandalorian season 2, episode 5, I think it was, when they introduced Ahsoka. That was almost the pilot episode for the Ahsoka series. And so, consequently, I think that you could have just done that. Well, now it's something else entirely. And I agree, they have to get it back on track. But see, they could use, and this is a big if, this is if they reduce the role of Dinner, like you suggested, maybe they kill him off. I don't necessarily think Bo-Katan would be replacing him because she already has a place in that universe that's equal to his, or at this point is even more of a focal point. You know,
Hmm.
she has a Darksaber now. She's ruling Mandalore, such as it is, and he's basically there supporting. Well, okay, if you take him out, Boba Fett would be the perfect person to slot into that role for a lot of those reasons you mentioned. I mean, he's a similar character. He has Imperial experience. He's feared. You know, I mean, people kind of know who Din is. Everybody knows who Boba Fett is. You say his name, and everybody's like, whoa. You know? So that's why I give it 60%. But I agree that a lot of it really depends on what they're going to do. And, you know, we really don't know. I mean, like I said, at this point, we don't have a storyline. We don't have anything really much to go on other than they're starting to give us little nuggets here and there. And of course, because we're Star Wars YouTube guys, we immediately seize on that and make it a
Hmm.
discussion point.
Yeah, man. I guess time will tell. I guess, especially the more information
Oh
we get
man,
about season 4.
we say that
I
every
know.
episode
Well, yeah,
because
because
it's,
I mean
well, it's
that's
true. I mean, that's
it's true.
basically it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember, it's like, well, time will tell. I mean,
Yeah, time will definitely tell for this one. So, season 4, of course, we're waiting with bated breath to see what they come up with. Hopefully, it returns back to the roots of season 1 and 2 of the show. And I was talking to a coworker of mine, Jacob, and he's a huge Mandalorian fan. He's even got the crest tattooed on his inside of his wrist of
well, he needs to be watching
uh,
our show then.
yeah, I know. He's definitely gonna pop in and check it out. Um, but yeah, we were just talking about like how season 3 was, and it's like, yeah, 1 and 2 were good, but season 3 was kind of all over the place and weird. But we're just excited to see what happens in 4. So, um, yeah, I I see Din, of course, championing season 4. Pedro is just going to do the voice again, and we're eventually going to get that story. But then moving forward, I think after the movie, though, I think that's when, if there is going to be a change, that's when we're going to see it.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly because I don't think there's going to be a season 5 before the film.
Okay,
I think
I
the
can see
movie
that.
because look, at this rate, we know that The Mandalorian season 4 is not on, at least that I've seen. It's not on the 2024 release schedule.
Hmm.
So that means it's probably going to be on the 2025 release schedule. And unless they shoot a couple of seasons back to back, I think at that point it's going to be time to concentrate on the movie. And again, it really depends on, all right, do we want to wait until a theoretical Ahsoka season 2? It's like, where does he want to slot this movie in?
Yeah, and
You
and
know,
and the
right.
story will. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, do I want additional seasons of these specific shows and that's going to lead into the film? Do I just need Mandalorian season 4 and that's going to lead into it? I mean, there's those unanswered questions as well that we have to yet to figure out, because that's going to be a big part of this whole Boba Fett question, is that when does the film come into play? Because that's where he's definitely, I have no doubt in my mind, he's probably going to appear in season 4. He wasn't in 3, but I think he will be in 4. And I also think that he's going to play a pretty big part in the movie, too. And so that could nicely set him up to, if not completely take over Din's role in season 5, perhaps rise to the same level of prominence.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, again, I think that we've probably speculated this one to death. So hopefully you guys have been chatting away and been talking about this. And then, leave your comment in the comment section. Let us know what you guys think. Should Boba Fett number one, return in The Mandalorian Season 4? Or would you rather see him saved perhaps for the Mandalorian film? And do you think that he's the guy that should be more prominent if, for whatever reason, they decide to write Din out? So those would be the two questions that we want you guys to answer. And of course, remember, you can also answer on our Discord. I've been having, Dragonfly and I have been having a little discussion on there. There's a lot of opportunities for you guys to chat about a lot of different things, not just Star Wars, but our Discord actually features a lot of little forums in there that you guys can, continue the discussion, whether it's anything we talk about on the show or stuff either maybe you guys want to see on the show or maybe just talk about outside of the show. That's why we actually built that, is so we can continue this community offline as well as every Monday and Friday. So speaking of which, from Monday's show, we don't really have anything lined up yet. Was there anything out there that's catching your eye, or are we just telling everybody to stay tuned?
Yeah, stay tuned. I haven't been as diligent, admittedly, this week. It's been a bit hectic week for myself, work wise, so I haven't had as much time to devote to it as much as I would like to. But I definitely will be looking, and we definitely will have something for Monday. So definitely stay tuned.
Yes, and Monday should be live, by the way.
Yeah.
Because, both of our schedules are a nightmare this week. So, unfortunately, we had to pre-record this past Monday and then, of course, tonight's. But this coming Monday and then the following Friday, we should be live. So, definitely watch for that. So, all right. I guess until Monday night at 8, we're just going to leave it at that. So, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.